Pain pills would not take away the pain. It wasn't an ear infection. It wasn't TMJ, when you sleep and grind your teeth. I got the mouth guard, tried that. I had an allergy test. I saw a chiropractor. Had special dental surgery. I'm still missing a tooth here from that. I had an MRI of my brain, my ears, and went to 2 ENT specialists. No one found a thing. But the earache worsened. I was driving down the 605 freeway, screaming at the top of my lungs, in pain, trying to figure out why it hurt so badly. Some thought it was stress. I had started a business. It was growing. I was traveling a lot. I changed my diet. I exercised. I got massages. I had stress therapy. Nothing took it away. Some thought it was all in my head. You're not really sick. You're just making it up. But I knew different. And finally, someone recommended I have a sinus test. Well, the sinus test didn't actually reveal the cancer. But when they sent me out for the labs and the imaging, I asked, would you mind doing an MRI of my throat? And they said, well, why? Do you have any problems? I said, no, but I've tried everything else. Please, do it. And I got that fateful call that everybody prays they never get. The doctor called the very next day. Come in and see me. I joked, which I do too much. I joked. I said, why do I have cancer of the nose? I thought, sinus. He wouldn't tell me on the phone, but he said, come in right away. And he said, yes, it's the C word. And he held up the film, and there was this big black mass in my throat. I said, do you smoke? Never. Well, it looks like throat cancer. You need to go to this specialist. Had I listened to my primary doctors, I would have died with that cancer. It would have eventually choked me to death. They would have prescribed more painkillers and said, there's nothing there. I was the one to persist. I just would not take no for an answer. 3 years. Winston Churchill, who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945 and then again in 1951 to 1955, is widely considered one of the 20th century's most significant figures. Churchill remains popular in the UK and worldwide. He is seen as a victorious wartime leader. He's also praised as a social reformer, a writer, and he's won many awards, including a Nobel Prize. There's a story, maybe you've heard, that once Churchill was invited to his prestigious alma mater to give his a commencement address. It said that this staunchly aristocratic Churchill slowly took to the podium, put on his spectacles, opened up his notes, and after clearing his throat, he looked at the audience of eager graduates, wanting to hear something eloquent from this stately man. And he offered these prolific words: never give up. Never, 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 never give up. He closed his notebook and he left the podium. Now, some of you are wishing that that's all I would say today and I would leave the podium, but no, it's not going to happen. Sorry. But what a powerful message in just those few short words. Never give up. As a Christian and an ordained minister, I often take my cues from the Bible. The Apostle Paul wrote in Philippians, "Not that I have already obtained all of this, or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that which Christ Jesus took hold of me." Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind, I strain ahead, and I press on toward the goal to win the prize which God has called me heavenward. 3 times in that short passage, Paul writes, I strain ahead, I press forward. That's what it means to never give up. No matter what challenges you face, whether it be a health challenge, a crisis at home, in your finance, in your business, never give up. Press forward. Persist. My earache challenge, which took 3 years, led to an extremely rare diagnosis of cancer. I saw a head and neck cancer specialist, Dr. Kokot, at Keck Hospital of USC. He confirmed it. But before I could get a treatment plan, the doctor abruptly went on an emergency family leave. With no timetable for his return, I was left wondering, what now? They've told me I have cancer. Now what? So it opened up an opportunity for me to get second opinions, third opinions, fourth opinions, and as I already stated, 27 opinions, all across the world, in Japan, in Spain, in Sweden, and of course here in the United States, New York, Boston, Seattle, Chicago, Houston, Denver, and 5 hospitals in LA. They all said the same thing. That was the problem. They all agreed, Randy, your only answer is to have your trachea removed, to have your larynx, your voice box, removed. Well, I speak for a living, so that didn't sound very good. But I decided that I would go ahead and have that complete procedure in New York at Sloan Kettering Hospital. And I went to support group for laryngectomy patients and got the little buzzer that you learn to speak with, practice. They said, "Oh, you're a natural, Randy," encouraging me. And then I got a call. The doctor at USC called me and said, "I'm back. I want you to see me." He didn't know that I'd already made up my mind. Out of courtesy, I was in Orlando giving a speech. Out of courtesy, I flew home that day. And I saw him the next day. That was May 24th, 2012. And he sat with me for an hour. And he said, "I know that you've heard from every doctor all over the world. And I know what they're asking you to have done. But I'd like to try something different." Well, I sat back. I said, "Okay, tell me." And he spent this time describing an unusual procedure where he would take the skin from my left wrist, all of the blood vessels out of my left arm, skin from my left thigh, bone cartilage from my rib cage, and open me up for what would be a 10-hour surgery. Basically, 4 or 5 surgeries in one, really, having multiple doctors working on me. And he would use those spare parts and rebuild my throat, removing the tumor, moving my vocal cords aside, putting them back with the hope that they would work. And Maybe. He said, maybe. I said, okay, doctor. That sounds pretty impressive. He was a young, scientific doctor. I mean, his approach was quite methodical and again, more scientific. I said, okay, doctor, I'm game, but tell me, how many times have you done this? His back was to me as he was describing things and looking at the x-rays. And then he slowly turned to me and had this glib look on his face. And he said, never. And I said, well, okay, I get it. But can I talk to somebody somewhere who's had this done? I mean, clearly, somebody in the world has had this done. And he continued to look at me and shook his head and said, no, never. You would be the first. Wow. I'm going to be the guinea pig. Nice. They're going to cut my arm, cut my wrist, cut my throat. Sounds like suicide if you ask me. Take skin from my leg, bone cartilage. Up to that point, I had never even been in the hospital. Never broken a bone, never had a surgery. Not a day. I guess I really didn't know what to expect, and I said, okay. I signed up. I mean, my brother, who was with me at the time, said, doctor, well, what do you think? The doctor said, it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot? I mean, come on, doctor, give me a little more confidence in that. So I signed up, and in June 18, 2012, for 10 hours, I was asleep, a nice sleep, and then in ICU for the next week. Again, persistence. 27 doctors all over the world had paved the way, this time, for a miracle surgery. I love the line from the Star Trek satire movie called Galaxy Quest. Maybe some of you have seen it. Where Commander Taggart, played by Tim Allen, the comedian, he would always say, never give up, never surrender. All throughout the movie, never give up, never surrender. So no matter what life throws at you, never give up, never surrender. Press forward. Lesson number 1. Persist. Persist. Don't shrink. Persist. Persist in your business pursuits. Persist at home. As the Apostle Paul said, he didn't quite have his goal, but he persisted. Persist. Now, I'm a fixer. I am known for finding solutions. I'm fiercely independent. So it was no surprise that when I was first learning about my diagnosis that I kept it to myself. I didn't even tell family for weeks. Didn't tell my staff. Was even slow at telling folks from my church. But soon I began to bring a small group of people around me. I knew I needed support. My brother, my pastor, a small group of people that I knew would help me and support me. But I remember one friend said, you better figure out why God gave you cancer. But it sounded to me like he was blaming me for getting cancer. And that's when I learned lesson number 2. Positivity. It isn't enough to have people around you. They need to be the right people. Rudy was just talking about that, about who he surrounds himself with in business. Same with me. Same in life. You need to have people in your corner, people who have your back. Interestingly enough, much of my family, I think we should be a sitcom. It would be a reality TV show. It would be a tragedy It would be. Most of you may have some of those experiences yourself. My family is highly dysfunctional. I have so much addiction in my family, homelessness, drugs, alcohol, prison. My nephew's in prison for life. He's 30. My brother was in prison. I found out I have more sisters than I ever was told. I found out, I was 50 years old, I found out I have another sister. What is going on in my family? I knew that these were some of the people I could not have around me during this time. Oh, I love my family, but from a distance. I needed positive, I hate to use the term energy, but you know what I mean. You need to be around people who will support you. I was encouraged to go to a cancer support group, but on my second or third meeting, it seemed that this group was terribly toxic. There I was just weeks after having my entire throat rebuilt, and I was eating a Subway sandwich. The guy next to me whined, said he hadn't had a sandwich in 4 years. The day I left the hospital, the very day I left the hospital after 7 days there, 5 days in ICU, 10-day surgery, 10-hour surgery, I went directly to In-N-Out Burger. I didn't even go home. I went to In-N-Out Burger, double, fries and a shake. Now, probably not advisable, but you know what? I'd rather focus on the things that I can do than focus on the things that I can't. You know, that support group, maybe not like all support groups. I'm sure that there's benefits in support groups. But that group was toxic, and I couldn't go back. I didn't want to be around people who focused on what they lost. I wanted to be focused on what I had. In fact, as part of my treatment, just 7 weeks after surgery, I was blessed, if you want to call it that, to have 33 rounds of radiation right in my throat. The radiation doctor said, imagine the worst sunburn you have ever had and put it in your throat. He said, you'll probably lose teeth. You'll lose saliva. You'll lose your taste buds. Plus, I was told I would probably lose up to 30 pounds because I wouldn't eat. So I was encouraged to eat whatever I want during this short break between surgery and radiation. Drink as many milkshakes as you can through the process. No problem. No problem. And my lovely support group at the time recommended a book that I would read. It was a book written by a former radiation patient. I got it. I read it. It scared the crap out of me. This book was a horror story. I mean, it was like, you're going to die. I thought, why would anybody write this? I went back to visit with the doctor before radiation. I said, I don't think I want to do this radiation. This guy wrote this book, and he named you, doctor. You were his doctor. He goes, yeah, I know the patient. Look, he wrote the book because it was dramatic. He needed to sell the book. But you'll be fine. You're strong. So I started radiation with a bit of apprehension. When you have radiation, maybe some of you or know somebody in your family who's had this, especially on your throat. They make you lay on a table, and they make a mask that looks a bit like Freddy from what is it, Halloween, or not Freddy? But they make this mask form-fit to your face, a little bigger, and then they bolt it to the table so you can't move. I mean, bolt it to the table. And there you are for about 20 minutes every day. And this is what I went through for 33 days. The doctor who started my radiation left, and a new doctor came, Dr. Eugene Chung, an amazingly positive individual. It made all the difference. His positivity began to rub off. They gave me meds to take so that if I got anxious while I was on the table, take this med. I never took any. They said, oh, you might need someone to drive you. Nah, I drove myself every day for 33 days. I became friends with the technicians and the nurses. Mike, he and his wife had twins. I sent him a gift basket. He got in a motorcycle accident, broke both arms, flipped over the handlebars. We went and talked about it. I said, you can't do this. You have 2 young babies. You know, I was friendly with these people. They said you can bring in whatever music you want to listen to during your radiation. I brought in the craziest, loudest rock music. But for me, it was positive. I needed to have positive music in my life. I rallied more friends to support me. I created an email support blog. I got some of the most touching responses, some from all over the world. In fact, one of my other jobs that I don't always talk about is I was a manager until a few years ago of an all-Japanese heavy metal band. I was just with them 2 weeks ago in Japan. This group of tattooed, smoking, swearing, drinking, crazy, long-haired, screaming rockers were then and continue today to be some of the most supportive, loving friends I've ever had who supported me through this whole process. The Apostle Paul also writes in the book of Thessalonians, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you. How can a person rejoice through 33 rounds of radiation? Well, I did. Even the days when swallowing water was so painful it brought tears to my eyes. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of the people around me. They bolstered my positivity. And those that didn't, I cast them sort of aside during this journey. I just couldn't be around them. They brought me down. The books that were all terrible. The support groups who just whined. I listened to positive music. Those days when I didn't feel like rejoicing, I had friends send me text messages and encouraging me. One of those friends is here today. Rie, wave at this crowd in the back. That's Rie back there. She has loved me, texted me, supported me from beginning to this very day she's here. Now, you can't have her. You need to find people in your own life like that, but you can't have her. She's all mine. Stay positive. It helped me remain on top of my disease and not under it. And here's the interesting thing. Remember what the doctor said I should expect? Lost teeth, lost. Well, I didn't lose any teeth. I didn't lose any saliva. I didn't lose my taste buds, thank God. And while the doctor was monitoring my weight weekly, waiting for me to drop all that weight, they might have to feed me intravenously, you know. And he looked at me one Monday as I stepped on the scale and he said, remember when I told you to eat anything, drink shakes? I said, yeah. He said, you can stop now. I said, what are you telling me? He said, well, I had gained 19 pounds. I've often joked with him, even to this day, that he was in essence calling me fat. He, of course, denies that. A few years ago, my cousin and I were visiting. She said, Randy, do you think you're all the way back now from your surgery and treatment? I said, heavens, no. No way. Sure, but well, it seems like you are because you're completely like you were before, albeit a little fatter. And I explained, I may only be 70% back. But instead of focusing on the 30% that I lost, I want to live in the 70% that I still have. See, that's what I mean. It's all in your perspective. Have a positive perspective. Remain hopeful. Don't talk about the sale you lost. Talk about the sale you're going to get. This will give you the edge in life. When things are tough, or even when they're good, an optimistic outlook will win you even in sales. I know I was named the sales leader in 2002 of a $6 billion organization. Now, as you heard, I have my own marketing company, and I have the privilege of helping generate all that money all across the world. That's not me. But I will tell you this. I wouldn't have been as successful if I was a negative, pessimistic naysayer. It just won't happen. Be positive. So finally, in my last point, we've talked about persistence. We've talked about positivity. Bet you can guess that the next word starts with a P. That's the preacher in me, right? The biggest lesson I learned coming out of my disease and surgery was purpose. I don't believe that God gave me cancer. God is a good father. He isn't about to give a terminal illness to his children. But then why does he allow it? That's a deeply theological question. And even though I have a degree in theology, this is not a theological talk today. However, I do get into that question quite a bit in my book. And this is a time for a commercial. Lori's back there. Wave, everybody, Lori. There's Lori. And she has my book both in hardback and paperback today for a deep discount. Would love for you to pick one up if you'd like. But Paul writes again in Romans chapter 8, one of my most memorable, most valuable text, one verse. He says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Paul didn't say God works all things out so they are good. Cancer is not good. There's no way to say it to make it good. Cancer is bad. It's ugly. It's difficult. It's bad. This God will work in all things for your good. So I had to come to terms with what God was working for my good in this very, very bad thing. And honestly, it took months, maybe years, for me to see it. But then one day, bam, it came to me. There it was. And it wasn't really new after all. He was fulfilling the desires of my heart. You see, back all the way in 1989, I went to my office then and I wrote on the whiteboard, August 28, 2011. August 28, 2011. I wrote that in 1989. And why I wrote that on my whiteboard and kept it up in my office then was because I knew on that day I would turn 50. I know you thought I was much younger. And when I turned 50, I said, I will retire. I'll save up enough money so that I can retire and spend the rest of my life traveling the world and giving away my life to charities. But when you're a cancer survivor, you become the yes man. Remember that movie with Jim Carrey? It's one of my favorites. The Yes Man. And so one of my colleagues said, Randy, I'm going to Africa to be at a board meeting. Why don't you accompany me at this organization's board meeting, and we'll do a few days safari. Now, some of you might have doing a safari on your bucket list? I know it's on a lot of people's bucket list. It wasn't on mine. I'll go to the San Diego Zoo. I'm sorry. It's animals. I mean, no thanks. But I went. Why? Because I had a new lease on life. Yes, I said, I'll go. Did my 25-hour flight, and took my first steps in Africa in Rwanda. Some of you know the history of Rwanda, that only 20 years ago there was this mass genocide where nearly 1 million people, they just killed each other. I mean, family members killing each other. I was amazed at my experience there. And I partnered with an organization there and came on their board. And then she said, I'm going to Kenya from there, and that's where we'll do our safari, but there's another charity. Would you be interested in going? And I'm, all right. It was an orphanage. I went, and I just fell in love with those kids. And I've been back 5 times. And I'm trying to do all I can to help By Grace Children's Home. And then it was Indonesia. You've heard a little bit about World Harvest. Because I work with charitable organizations, I learned about World Harvest, and I said, how can I help? Well, as a business, my company, it wasn't a good fit. But I could help. And the first thing I said, well, let me sponsor a child. That's the first thing. I said, set me up. And they hooked me up with I think a 9-year-old little boy in Indonesia named Christo. And a few months later, I said, it's not enough for me just to send my money. I want to go. I hadn't even heard of Indonesia. Frankly, I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I grew up here, you know. And there I went to Indonesia, another 25 hours. And I met Christo. And I've been back 4 or 5 times. I just came back, as you heard. And now that Christo's almost 13, he'll be 13 in December. And we started a college fund. And I've met his younger brother and his mom and dad. And we're helping them go to school. Since 2012, I've been in 20 different countries, speaking and helping. I've met so many people along the way. I share my story, my miracle surgery. And God's working even bad things out for good. A couple of years ago, a couple that I met were getting married in Japan, and they asked me to marry them. Well, this is going to be interesting. I had to learn Japanese a little. Nihongo skoshi. So I did this wedding. This couple has now come here and visited. I met a young man who was employed at the hotel in Thailand. He had gone through a miserable time in his family. And in fact, his very, very close sister, only 29 years old, I believe, had died only 3 months earlier because of throat cancer. And so Tommy was standing there as the concierge, and he said, what brings you to Thailand? And I showed him the scar on my arm, and I said, I have a new lease on life. He said, what happened? I told him, and he began to cry. I had no idea of his family and what had happened. But I looked at him and I said, God sent me here. And he had a huge turnaround in his life. Then a waiter in Shanghai, MJ. I was waiting for an event. Sat down at a restaurant and ordered dinner. And he was serving me, and all of a sudden there wasn't too many people. And he said, what brings you here? And we talked. He was shocked. What? You had your vocal cords removed? Moved back? What? Couldn't believe it. He got married. They had their first child who was diagnosed with some disease at birth. And he sent me a message and said, please pray. I did. I was back there earlier in January seeing his wife and son doing fine. You know, these are the experiences that have been unlocked as a result of a very, very bad situation. And again, they were a part of a plan back in 1989. On and on, my purpose to travel the world and help organizations meet and encourage people and share my story continues. Rick Warren, the author of the New York bestseller, The Purpose-Driven Life, says, finding one's purpose only requires that you look in your hand. What he means is it isn't some mystical, I can't figure it out in the smoke kind of thing. It's what you do naturally. It's what you enjoy. Finding your purpose is right in front of you. I love travel. I have nearly 5 million frequent flyer miles on American Airlines. I was in Indianapolis yesterday. I'll be in New York tomorrow. I enjoy it. I'm my best when I'm out. In fact, in Indonesia for 28 days, I thrive. I mean, hotels aren't the greatest. I love Indomart and Alphamart. The bathrooms I could do without. Let me tell you. But I enjoy it, and this is part of my purpose. That's why I wrote my book, Finding My Voice. Obviously a play on words given my surgery, but it's not really my voice that I found. It's my inner voice. It's my purpose. It's my meaning. It's my reason for existing. Yeah, I've had the joy of working in and starting and developing successful companies, raising a lot of money for charity, and that is certainly great work, and I've been blessed to do it. But my purpose is greater than that because it involves people. It involves one-on-one conversations and life change around the world. Bob Buford, a successful entrepreneur, wrote a book years ago called Halftime. It basically tells of his journey to move away from the corporate world that he was living in and all that success that he was pursuing to something with more purpose. He coined the phrase, moving from success to significance. That's what it means. I'm not poo-pawing success. I think success is great. Let me say this about my success. It has actually freed me to have more significance. When I had planned to retire back in 1989 and retire at 50, I thought I might have, $1 million in the bank, my 401k and whatnot, and I would try to manage that and work and live on that. It would help me achieve my goals. But God caused something to happen that was much different than I had planned. I have many more resources now to do even more of what I dreamed. In life, we all need purpose. We need to answer the big why question. First, why cancer? Why do I lose a loved one? Why did I not get that promotion or make that sale? And as you wrestle with this, consider that there is a bigger why. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is my calling? That's what I believe. That's how I got through the hardest, darkest, most painful 7 years of my life. I persisted. I never gave up. I remained positive, or at least worked to have positive people and influence in my life. And I knew that God promised to make good of a bad situation, that He had a purpose for me. And He gave me my heart's desire. So while the last 7 years, without question, have been the hardest, darkest, most painful time in my life, I can absolutely, without question, unequivocally say these last 7 years have been the absolute best in my life. And I look forward to more. Now, guess what? I'll give you a little tip on the book. I don't have cancer in my throat anymore. Oh, that was removed. It's gone. I do sometimes suffer from vocal or throat issues relative because of the treatment I had in the surgery. And that requires some occasional needles in the throat, things I don't recommend. But the cancer in 2016 was found in my lungs. It's the same cancer. It's not lung cancer. It's rare. It grows very slow. I still have it. There's no treatment. Nothing that will take it away. They've tried some trial drugs. They weren't effective. The drugs they're recommending now, insurance has denied twice. They cost $12,000 a month. So I'm not taking them yet. We'll see. But my outlook on this situation in my life is so much different. You see, the last 7 years taught me that I can persist. And if I choose to live above and not below, then I will survive. Never surrender. Never give up. Stay positive. Find your purpose. That's my encouragement for you today. I hope you never face a medical situation like I faced. But again, whatever you face in your life and your work and your pursuits, I would encourage you to remain positive, persist, and find the ultimate purpose in your life through those experiences. That's what I did, and that's my story. Thank you for letting me share with you today. I appreciate it. And